Welcome back and good evening. You're watching Gambia 24 with me, Mariama Cham. Thanks for joining us, and now the news in detail. The Gambia has on Friday registered 2 new COVID-19 cases, taking the total number of confirmed cases in the country to 3,659. With 1 new death recorded, the total number of deaths is now 119. The National Situation Report released by the Ministry of Health indicated that 104 new laboratory test results were received from the National Public Health Laboratory, and no new tests returned inconclusive. With 1 new recovery, the total number of recoveries are 2,660. The country currently has no one in quarantine, 880 active cases, and crude case fatality ratio of 3.3%. Now, Malang Balo said he feared death after NIA arrested him for cutting the trousers of Yaya Jammeh's nephew and for insulting the president. Omar Ahmed Toure reports.
A former teacher was taken by the notorious NIA for questioning after he cut Demba Ba's trouser and jokingly asked if he was going to tell his uncle Yahya Jammeh about it. The NIA officers headed by Baba Sao went to pick him up at St. Augustine, where he was teaching, and taken to the NIA. There he was told that he had insulted the president, and from their observation, he is among those people that didn't want the leadership of the AFPRC. The NIA then took him from Banjul to the Nyambai forest, and Malanding explained what his feelings were when he was carried to the place.
When we arrived at the camp, that was where I was just devastated. Because in other words, that was the last straw that would break the camel's back. So at that juncture, I concluded that it was the end of me. We drove deep inside the forest. But I cannot tell you the amount of prayers I offered. We went inside, we saw some women fetching firewood. So the vehicle was parked and nobody came down. Until when the women disappeared, the 4 of them came out of the car. They left me inside. So they went behind the car and talked among themselves.
Malandin said Alphaba, Alaji Martin, Malafikor, and Daba Marena were the NIA officers that took him to the Nyambai forest, and he now recounts what actually happened to him at the place.
When I lied on my stomach, Alpha took his boots and stepped at the back of my neck. So there are these local whips. They are made from animal skin. They locally call them lemar. General Alaji Martin was the first one that took that out from, I don't know where he actually took it off, whether he was tying it on the waist or where, but he was the one who took one out. I just saw him swinging that one. General Alaji Martin lemo floati menyi lemaro bondi. Aya bondi dami malom fa besiti na tel to mbam fa bondi dami malom baratele floye lemaro findindi ka finja. And he started beating me. So because my hands were not tied, but I was using my arms to break the whip so that it does not reach my back, but I couldn't. It was just an attempt. It was not possible. You see, the lemar is such that if you hit somebody with it, you remove it, it comes out with the top skin. So there were a lot of lacerations and cuts on my arms and at my back, at my buttocks, at my thighs, at the back. So when Alaji Martin finished, bring Alaji Martin ye bandi, he gave to Malafikor. He also beat me in tone. He also took his round. So they then passed the whip to the one they were calling Nakeba. Who was the leader of the trip, and that was Daba Marena. He was the leader of the gang called Daba Marena. That's the person they call our elder. Daba also took his turn on my skin. Daba fanang ya alawato ta kambala jato lipa. So Alpha Ba was having the pistol, he really never laid a whip on me.
Alpha Ba de kidinding bolo bolo bare atemang karwa sota kalipa.
But these other three people beat me in turns. I think each gave me maybe more than 15 or so lashes.
He said the beatings he received were accompanied with insults, abusive words, and calling him provocative names. After the beatings, he was taken to the Banjul police station for detention and was threatened with death if he should tell anybody about what happened to him. And this incident happened in the year 1995. Jammeh's 22-year rule in Gambia was marked by widespread abuses, including killings, and the NIA was notorious for these violations. Under his rule, rights and freedoms were curtailed and crossed, with ordinary citizens, government officials, and opposition activists and journalists abducted, arrested, tortured, and illegally detained by the NIA. For iAfrica TV, I am Omar Ahmad Toure.
From that TRRC report, now the Gambia government has on Thursday donated 200 bags of rice to the flood victims in Nemakunku, a village in the West Coast region. The donation follows the October 12 flood that destroyed houses and rendered streets and roads inaccessible. Fatimata Kasim has more.
Dozens of houses were destroyed in the communities of Nemakunku and Sunchubalia in the Kombo district of the West Coast region during floods that occurred on the 12th and 13th of October. More than a month after the destruction, the Gambia government responded with a food package of 200 bags of rice. The National Assembly member for Olyundum, the constituency under which the flood victims live in, said the food will reach the right people affected. Honorable Abdullah Sise also said there are others in these communities who may have not been affected by the floods but deserve support as needy people.
Wow, su nekké né comme ñi nga xamné ñoo yaxulé ñu yépp am nañ li ñu wara am ba paré.
Yes, after the distribution of the bag of rice to the flood victims, the community will give the rest to the less privileged because that's the idea. People live together but are not equal in terms of earnings. Some really deserve to be supported, whether or not they are disaster victims. They are the needy people.
Last month, dozens of houses, including a Christian cemetery, were destroyed in the community of Sunchubalia. As a result, some families were left homeless as their houses collapsed while other homes were inundated. Ibrahim Mambure, the secretary of the Nemakunkum Village Development Committee, said 50 of the 200 bags of rice donated by the government will be given to flood victims in Sunchubalia.
Physically, they in on 200 bags of rice.
The government brought 200 bags of rice, but we have come to the conclusion with the Honorable Member of Parliament of Olyundum that Nemakunku is not the only affected community. Our neighbors in Sinchubalia too are affected. So we took 50 bags and gave it to them. The remaining 150 bags of rice is what we will distribute among the flood victims in Nemakunku.
On October 16, reports emerged that opposition leader Mama Kande of the Gambia Democratic Congress donated 75 bags of rice to the flood victim in Nemakunku. After Kande's donation, some residents chided the government as sleeping. Kadi Fofana, the councillor of the Nema ward, said she has been receiving calls as to whether the government would help victims of floods.
Mama Kande nala multi 75 bags of rice natin ang kacheka kadila.
People phoned me asking if the government was not going to help the flood victims. They said that we are sleeping, but I told them the government does not just give help like that. It takes time. Help from the government comes step by step because we go by protocols and procedures. We just don't jump into issues. The government is not in competition with anyone.
Floods have been a major natural disaster affecting the Gambia over the last decade, aggravated by the establishment of settlements on watercourses like Talinding, Ibo Town, New Joshuang, and Bakau. Its effects have been a cause for concern because the Gambia has a low capacity to deal with massive flooding. Fatmata Kasim for iAfrica TV.
The donation of bag of rice from the flood victims will take us to a short commercial break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. And now to the rest of our stories. The Attorney General and Minister of Justice have been tasked to initiate a dialogue among stakeholders with the view to reaching a consensus on what next will happen to the draft constitution. The idea to revive the discarded draft constitution was reached at a cabinet meeting in Banjul on Thursday. Let's take a listen. The process of making a new supreme law for the Gambia was abruptly brought to a halt in September after 23 lawmakers voted against the two-term limit proposal for presidents. After a cabinet meeting on October 22nd, the Gambia government tasked the Justice Minister to set in motion consultations and processes to determine what will happen to the discarded draft constitution. The Minister of Information, Ibrahim Silla, made the announcement.
First, Cabinet has mandated the Attorney General and Minister of Justice to proceed and initiate a dialogue among all stakeholders with the view to reaching out a consensus over the draft constitution.
Also, during the Thursday's cabinet meeting, the Finance and Health Ministers presented a joint paper on the draft National Health Insurance Scheme bill. The bill is intended to reduce the burden of out-of-pocket expenditure by patients and to protect households from high spending by diverting prepayment mechanisms such as the National Health Insurance Scheme.
The bill will establish a National Health Insurance Authority to implement a health insurance scheme with a fund which will pay the cost of healthcare services to members of the scheme. In addition, provisions are being made for a private health insurance scheme. However, persons under the age of 5 years, pensioners, categories of persons living with disability, persons living with mental illness, persons above the age of 65, persons in need of antenatal delivery and postnatal healthcare services are exempted from payment of contributions under the National Health Insurance Scheme.
During the Thursday's cabinet meeting, the Ministries of Women and Children Welfare, Communication and Youth and Sports have also presented plans and programs for development. Reporting for iAfrica News, this is Mariama Cham. Those were cabinet ministers on their 7th cabinet meeting. Now, there have been growing concerns from the European Union, other partners and citizens of the Gambia over the country's slow-paced security sector reform process. But President Barrow's National Security Advisor told journalists during a press conference on Friday that the government has made a breakthrough. Details in this report by Julden Jaisware.
According to the National Security Advisor, there have been overall qualitative changes towards the formation of a security sector that is responsive to the people of the country. Colonel Momodu Baji said the political space that has been created by the government has enabled civil society organizations to be able to work and express their views on the security sector reform and other issues of concern.
And then they are working to be protectors and ensuring their well-being and prosperity with emphasis, obviously, on human dignity. I think they have also evolved and then they are transforming. The SIS also has improved their services and then their priority is training and orientation of their staff to ensure that the fundamentals of modern intelligence and the tradecraft of intelligence is entrenched in their institutions.
President Adama Barrow launched the Security Sector Reform Project in 2017, geared towards ensuring an effective and accountable security sector under democratic control with full respect for human rights, the rule of law and fundamental principles of good governance. Baji, a top security advisor, told journalists on Friday that the National Intelligence Agency, a once drained torture institution, has improved because of the reforms. He said they no longer oppress or effect arrests on anybody.
In this country is as a result of the invitation that was extended for them to come and assist in the stabilization of the country. I think it is, known to everybody here. I think we are all aware of what happened in 2016. Though we have not had and we did not run into conflict, but we had a difficult impasse. We had an impasse and a very difficult, indeed, a transition.
Colonel Momodou Badji also said that the government plans to draft a national defense and internal security policy. This policy will lay the foundation and establish for a more professional security sector.
We want to also express and put it on record that we want to thank them for their remarkable and always reliable support on the ongoing security sector reform. We have gone this far. What is left and what is ahead, we have just framed as our next steps. To take us to the end of the process, we are about to draft, like I said earlier, the national defense and internal security policies. There will be an enactment of the vetting agency.
Badji said despite the numerous transitional risks and challenges, security sector reform is a must, which will enable the country to have a peaceful, stable, secure and civilized nation. In September last year, the European Union ambassador to the Gambia, Attila Laios, expressed disappointment at the slow pace of Gambia's security sector reform, saying tangible changes in the security sector are yet to be felt by the population. For iAfrica News, I am Julden Suare.
That story by Julden Suare on the Gambia security sector reform will bring us to the end of Gambia 24. Join us for more news on iAfrica.tv. I was your presenter, Mariama Cham. Do have a good night.
TRRC is mandated to make recommendations for prosecution or amnesty for human rights violations. However, the TRRC has not made any recommendations for prosecutions yet.
kaas pawo bi jeex na depuis démba xettali ma rek ni jaay nga jëndal ma kaas pawo balaa yére yi di wow dama passé
fii amoo fi benn xaalis laa amut waaw may ma tuuti waaw Mamadou waaw ma ne dimbale ñu rek nga yónnee ñu kaas pawo léegi suñ kaas pawo moo jeex depuis démb ok baax na
waaye yow ni jaay jaaxle naa de yow Mamadou naka lam ñoo jëndalee kaas pawa te fekk mu ngi bitim réew ni jaay
xanaa xamuloo ne ak balu waaye mën a nekk ci bitim réew mun naa yónnee njabootam kaas pawa